All right. Hello and welcome to the ZACP official YouTube channel. And well, I'm Ramon Kavanak, the co-founder, and let me introduce Kenton Pillay, the founder and the chairman. Good afternoon, Kenton.
And good afternoon to all of you. And thank you for having patience with us over the past period while we've been plotting our strategy for the way forward in terms of where we take the ZACP. Firstly, I think just a little bit of feedback in terms of the way in which we did in the elections. If you consider that we had been live for roughly 6 weeks at the point at which we contested the election, and during that period, we managed to pull a very solid base of support of 16,000 people who voted for us in the national elections. And if you consider that this was enough to put us ahead of established players who have successfully contested elections in the past. We're talking about the likes of Ahang, we're talking about the likes of Zapo, and a host of others. 48 parties contested the election, and we finished very comfortably in the top 20 of that lot. And I think if you consider in terms of bang for buck where we started from, we established a very solid base in a short space of time. And so the question that we now needed to apply ourselves to, given that our objective of wanting to get at least one of us into parliament didn't really work out, how best to build on the strengths that we have accumulated thus far and plot a way forward. So in other words, it becomes, how do we build sustainability based on the solid base that we've got right now of at least 16,000 people who voted for us. And of course, there were a lot more who told us that they were not able to vote for us simply because they had not registered. And the reason why they hadn't registered is because they had not been aware of the fact that we existed. So our base, we know, is in fact larger than what we have reason to believe.
And just important to note, we received quite a few emails and messages, probably in the hundreds by now, of people who say they voted for us, but their votes were not counted for some reason. They were counted as spoiled. So, we are following up on those, but for now, there's not much we can do at the moment, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so there was, of course, the option of launching a legal challenge to ensure that those votes got counted. I think ultimately we took a view that any legal challenge that was going to put the election process on hold right now was going to literally have an implication of billions of rand that was going to set back the economy. And I think right now, to essentially go on a highly principled exercise in order to try and ascertain exactly where election fraud took place. And let's be very clear, we do believe very strongly that election fraud did take place. But the question is whether the number at which it took place was enough to sustain a significant change should we now take it to court. And I think we all agreed as the ZACP that it was highly unlikely that the outcome would be materially different. I think we'd still have an ANC majority, perhaps a lessened majority, and there's no doubt that we as the ZACP would have picked up more votes as a result. But again, not at the level where we believe it would have made a significant difference. And it became far more crucial to us to focus on going forward, because that has always been our emphasis. How best do we go forward, and how best do we end up building rather than continuing to point fingers at the corruption that is out there. So the first question was around how do we build sustainability? And the big issue for most political parties in this continent really is that they fall apart because they become dependent on those big ticket donors. And as soon as they have big ticket donors, you then end up in a situation where they are essentially pushing an agenda that is subject to the wishes of those big donors. And we can also have a scenario where government pressure on those donors then shuts down those sources. For example, when we went out fundraising, when we started the ZACP, there were a number of very high-profile people that we approached that we have good relationships with. I mean, I myself have friends who, they're literally billionaires, and the word that came down from them was that they'd be very happy to give us money for business ventures, but they couldn't take the risk of actually funding a political organization that might actually put them in a bad light with government. So we've got this scenario right now where with political party funding, it really is only the corrupt that end up surviving. So we've discussed how best to build a business model that will ensure that we survive without government being able to pull the plug on it, or without us being dependent on special interest groups, because that ends up being the death of democracy. So our business model really has to build on our strengths as capitalists. And our strengths, basically, we have lean, low-cost operations. We have transparency and disclosure, full transparency and disclosure, and that has to continue to be there at every step of the way. And we need to have complete accountability at any given stage. So there can't be a situation where money goes missing or people don't know what's going on, and we don't have a way of giving a reasonable answer to our support base. And this is particularly important because our support base believes in our cause, and they've backed it with real money. If you consider the short period that we ended up fundraising over the past over the last weeks prior to the election, we raised about R250,000 in donations from exactly our support base, which is phenomenal if you think about it. And the question then becomes, can we then build on that support base, because they do believe in our cause and they have backed it with money. And so we've taken the view that the way in which the ZACP has to be built going forward is we need to build a subscriber base. And it's a subscriber base that is giving us small but regular amounts of money that's going to build our sustainability. And for now, we've set a subscription model at 50 Rand per month for membership. 50% of this, by the way, will flow back to the branches in terms of the structure that we have in mind, but more on that later. But essentially, we take the view that getting 50 Rand a month from a sustained base of members, if you consider 16,000 people voted for us, if of those 16,000, half of the people who voted for us are willing to come to the party, so to speak, and put forward 50 Rand a month, that gives us a solid base of about R500,000 a month, which can then be used to build a sustainable model to go forward to contest the forthcoming elections. Roman, was there anything you wanted to add on that point?
Well, I think it's just important to note that, I mean, this is maybe something new for the political scene, but a lot of great organizations have used this model with great success. If you look at the Outers of South Africa, if you look at AfriForum, if you look at a few other NGOs who coalesce around some principles, or who fight a particular fight in public, or go to court for a particular against a particular entity or for a particular principle, this is the fairest and most accountable way to fundraise, but also for supporters to have a say in the running of the organization. Because if we do well, we get more support. If we fail to live up to the expectations of our supporters, we will lose funding as well. So it's in terms of accountability on both sides, it's the fairest one.
Right. So then the further question that then came up, which frankly, at the time of our going into contesting the last national election, was not one that was on our minds at all, which was the question of whether we were actually going to participate in the elections down at the municipal level and at the provincial level. Now, I think we were very clear going into this 2019 election that there was a group of 10 of us, and we were only interested in contesting the national election, because our view was that we were going to exert maximum influence at the level of policy making and policy formulation, economic oversight in terms of the budget and that type of thing. But what became very clear from the feedback from people who ended up corresponding with us through Facebook, through Twitter, through and particularly through the Purple Stampede Telegram group, which really was our most effective form of organization, it became very clear that there was a very real desire on the part of our supporters to really take our business model and translate it down to every possible level of government. Now, this creates an interesting challenge for us as the ZACP, because I think of the 10 of us, all of us were pretty clear that we don't want to become professional politicians in the way that other political parties end up running themselves. We were very strongly of the view that our strength has to be at the level of formulation. And really, we had this elevator model because there were 10 of us. You could put 10 of us into an elevator, and by the time we go from the ground floor to the top floor, we can actually reach consensus among us. And that made us very effective in terms of turning around decisions at short notice. Now, when you have to create political structures that filter down through the entire country, down to the level of every municipality, that can very quickly become unwieldy. And our concern really is, how can we rely upon the strengths that we've created as small, lean operations and translate that into what effectively becomes a nationwide structure? So our idea really is that we adopt a very corporate approach to doing this. So our branch structures, rather than referring to them as branches, I know that some people in our Telegram group have wanted to refer to those branches as kraals, but we're taking a very solid business approach to this. And the idea is that every one of those branches becomes, from our point of view, a strategic business unit. Now, the whole idea behind a strategic business unit, as those of us who are used to the corporate world will know, is that they operate with a high degree of autonomy. So they become responsible for running almost all affairs on a day-to-day basis. And they do so in terms of a charter that is handed down by the central organization. So it effectively becomes almost a franchise model, if you like to think of it that way. It's a model that's used very successfully by a number of large organizations. For example, speaking from my experience as a member of Rotary, every Rotary branch is an independent organization, but they all are bound by the charter of Rotary International, who ensures that they are keeping to the rules in terms of abiding by the principles, ensuring financial accountability. But the branches then end up setting their own goals at a local level. And this becomes very important for us. If you consider that nearly every political party adopts a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of how they contest municipal elections in particular. Now, from my point of view, as someone who lives in Gauteng, potholes and traffic lights might be a priority for me. For someone in a small municipality in the Western Cape, access to drinking water might be a higher priority. So our entire premise is to structure branches in the ZACP as strategic business units with an extremely high degree of autonomy, who are in turn going to be bound by our 10 principles, and in turn will augment those with additional requirements that they may see fit to bring in that are particular to their local area. And we think that this is important, that there not be anything prescriptive that happens at the level of the board, as we're now referring to ourselves, that filters down to the local areas. So again, the whole idea is to give maximum autonomy down to the branch level, but that autonomy is highly structured in the sense that we are expecting full adherence to the 10 principles, and there will be a charter that actually binds every single strategic business unit to the principles and objectives of the ZACP as a whole, and also ensures financial accountability, because we do insist on every single one of those having audited financial statements that are presented to us at least once a year. And it's not a complicated process, because it really just requires appointing an accountant who is going to oversee the strategic business unit and make sure that they're playing by the rules. But it's our way of ensuring that we are maximizing democracy, but ensuring financial accountability and transparency, which has to be one of our strengths going forward. Raman?
Right. So I think people should understand a strategic business unit. Just imagine it as a pool of resources that the people in the unit coalesce around the ZACP, for example, and they use those resources to further the goals of the party, to host events, perhaps to create online content, YouTube channels, videos, podcasts, things like that, or even weirdly enough, just invest and make sure that when the time comes, when the local government election is there, that the money is used to get posters, to get some campaigning on the ground, things like that. So it's a very open-ended branch of the party, the strategic business units. And we want to give as much autonomy as possible to really unleash the creativity of people who never even thought that they would be in politics one day, but who actively want to get involved with the ZACP. And the strategic business unit is the best way to do that, by granting full autonomy with a bit of oversight from the mother body.
Right. So just to give you some perspective in terms of how we envisage these strategic business units being set up, as we speak right now, our website has currently gone live with our membership functionality. So the whole idea is that go to our website and the membership tab is now active, and you'll be immediately able to sign up. There'll be vetting that takes place in terms of ID numbers, because we want to make sure that you are real people. But what is going to happen thereafter is that, based on the data that you end up providing in terms of where you are based, we will make use of the municipal demarcation databases and drill down to your exact GPS location, and you'll be allocated to an SBU that is based in your geographic area. And the main reason for this is that we want decisions that take place in a particular location to be really handled by our support base who are based in that area. So we don't want a situation like other political parties do, where there's a mayoral candidate, for example, that gets imposed from an entirely unrelated area. As far as we're concerned, if you are based in a particular municipal ward, as an example, that ends up becoming the local branch structure. And every person who's a member of the ZACP in that particular space ends up being a member of that particular branch, or strategic business unit, as we prefer calling it. One of the prime tasks that we expect from each of these strategic business units is to identify a person that they will put forward as a ward councillor for that particular area. Because remember that the way in which municipal elections get conducted are very different from the national elections. The municipal elections, you have a combination of a constituency base, which means that you vote for a person based on your particular ward. And then there's also a proportional representation level as well. So really what we would like for each of the SBUs to do is to actually identify that person among their ranks to put forward, who's effectively going to be the councillor, the municipal representative in the next elections. So that way we've got a fairly solid base to put forward in terms of the next elections. However, it's not going to be as business as usual from the point of view of people who end up being councillors for us. The first thing that we're going to be absolutely insistent upon is that there's a promise of performance that gets signed by every single person who goes in. And that promise of performance basically includes all of the things that any employer would require of an employee. You see, effectively, we take the view that people who are elected to public office are public servants. And as public servants, they need to be accountable in the same way that any employee is accountable to an employer. But currently, the scenario is we elect people for 5 years and there's zero accountability. So they can end up not pitching up for work, as is the case in, I think, the majority of parliamentarians are absent more often than they are actually present in the National Assembly. So we're trying to eliminate that. So every person that is put forward as a municipal candidate we are going to bind them by that promise of performance that says that they are required to attend a minimum number of council meetings. They are required to be there for every council vote, and they are also required to table a specific number, which will fluctuate based on the area, obviously, number of private motions, shall we say, for changes to be effected at that municipal level. And also, we did have that promise of performance at a national level where we said that we wanted 34% of the money that gets raised as a result. We wanted a 34% reduction. Now, we think that most municipalities are highly unlikely to want that 34% reduction, but we are insistent that in the case of people who stand as municipal councillors under the ZACP banner, that 34% then gets plowed back into the ZACP kitty. And of course, as we were saying earlier, 50% of that kitty is going to be devolved down to the strategic business units for them to use for their marketing, election posters, all of those other things. Roman, have I left out anything?
Well, I think also in terms of accountability for ward councillors, I think there's two types as well. We haven't discussed this before, but I'm sure Catherine would agree. There will be accountability from the side of the SBU. So it could be a petition if many members of the branches could have a petition to say that the ward council is actually not doing their job properly. They will hand that petition to us, and we can do. We can look at it and make a decision, or from our side, if they fail to adhere to the code of conduct that we gave to them before they became a ward councillor, they can be removed as well. So there will be two ways to hold a ward councillor accountable, and on very easy and measurable performances as well.
I think that a lot of us are very clear, a lot of us who are dissatisfied voters, as an example, are very clear that by and large municipalities have not been accountable to those direct demands that each of the wards have put in place. I mean, for example, I voted for the DA in the last municipal election because I wanted my mayor, Herman Mashaba, to do three things. I want him to fix potholes, I want him to fix traffic lights, and I want him to clean up the rubbish. And none of those three things have actually happened. Instead, my rates are currently being spent on things like inner city rejuvenation and upliftment of poorer areas. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with spending tax money on uplifting other areas. But that's why we have a national budget. Rates and local government taxes are meant precisely for fixing the type of day-to-day things that we are speaking about. We're very clear that the role of ZACP representatives at a local government level has to be to focus on those matters. We're not there to fix the ills of yesteryear. We want real delivery that takes place on the ground for the electorate who end up voting for us, and that has to be our priority. So we're going to be unashamed about this, and we're probably going to take a lot of flack from people who are going to toss the usual arguments in our direction that say, well, we don't care about the poor. No, it's not true. We do care about the poor. But actually, we believe that charity begins at home. And we start by fixing the things that make it difficult for us to earn money. And that in turn has an impact on the amount of money that we have at our disposal to actually make everyone's life better. So we're going to be very pig-headed about that type of stuff to ensure that there is accountability that kicks in at the local level. Roman?
No, well, I cannot agree with you more. The local level is about literally administration and making sure that the public service at the local level works. So potholes, traffic lights, collection of rubbish, accurate billing systems. It's a very administrative type of job. And as a ward councillor, you'll be expected to ensure that that sort of stuff, works. So yeah, that's all I want to say. Back to you.
So as many of you can gather from this, our focus over the next 2 years is very much going to be at the level of putting in place those structures that are going to ensure that we have an effective base of people who are going to be contesting the municipal elections. Now, you might well wonder where that leaves the 10 of us who, and those working behind the scenes with us at a national level. Well, at a national level, our focus is still very much at the national level. So don't expect any of us to be involved in actually contesting the next municipal elections in 2 years' time. Although obviously we will be front and center campaigning quite actively at the time that that happens, because our intention is to get as many of us who support our aims and principles into municipal structures as far as we possibly can. But our focus at a national level is going to be very much on building up to contest the next national election in 5 years' time. So there are two main ways that we intend ensuring that we are keeping ourselves in the public eye, so to speak. As you're aware, we had put in place 10 plans, which we had wanted to table in Parliament. In spite of the fact that we are not physically in Parliament, the first thing that we'll be doing is turning those into drafted pieces of legislation for submission as private members' bills in Parliament. And it is our intention to hand those private members' bills to other political parties and then to drum up support for them to push those bills through as private members' bills. It'll be really difficult for them to refuse to do so, because if you consider the way in which we have crafted our 10 plans, they are all, firstly, they are simple, they're effective, and they are inexpensive. So any excuse that political parties might come up with in terms of why they're not willing to bring these forward into Parliament are going to be really difficult for them to motivate. So we're going to be pushing very strongly to be a legislative body in Parliament, even though we are not physically in Parliament ourselves. And we think that there's going to be the weight of public opinion on our side at the point at which parties do not cooperate with us around this. The second thing that we need to look at doing is to strengthen our ability to then follow up with inaction on the part of people in Parliament with effectively court action. I think that we are going to be needing to build a solid base to be able to litigate on matters that actually tie in with our principles. It's not that we believe in legislation on the basis of litigation, but we do believe that litigation becomes a critical piece of strengthening democracy. And in order for us to do this, we believe that the best means to do that is to set up a nonprofit organization that is associated with the ZACP. For now, we are referring to this as the ZACP Legal Defense Fund. And the whole idea is that subscription funds that we raise, we will channel through into the ZACP Legal Defense Fund. And the other advantage that we have in setting up something like the ZACP Legal Defense Fund is that it will allow outside players to donate money specifically to that NPO for the purposes of strengthening democracy through legal action. So it's very different from someone funding a political party directly. So we're very happy to say to people, look, don't fund us as a political party, but do put money into this NPO, which is going to actually further our causes. And of course, that NPO, like everything else that we do, is going to be bound by transparency. Although in the level of high-value donors for that particular organization, we obviously will not apply the same strictures that we apply for a political party. But certainly for that institution, there will be complete transparency in terms of the quantum of money that we receive and how the money gets spent. So those levels of transparency will always be in place. So specific examples of what we'd like to be doing with the ZACP Legal Defense Fund. And I'm just going to hone in on one for now as an example of what we can do. We do know that there are a number of members of Parliament right now who, if we actually perform lifestyle audits on them, it will become very clear to us that they are living beyond their means. In other words, they have illegal sources of income that are accruing to them that are not related to valid business interests or that are not related to the salary that they draw as members of Parliament. You see, even if you are earning 100,000 Rand a month as a parliamentarian, which translates to about 60,000 Rand a month after that, it's really difficult for you to simultaneously maintain the house in Hyde Park, the beach house in Plet, the Lamborghini, the 4x4, and all of those things. However, Parliament has consistently refused to do these lifestyle audits because obviously the Speaker of Parliament is unlikely to go after members of her own party. Our view is that as the ZACP, through the Legal Defence Fund, we will actually put in place investigative units that making use of publicly available information, and we're not suggesting at any level that we do anything illegal, but we are very clear that there is enough publicly available information that's able to generate a body of evidence that shows that one particular politician at a time is actually falling foul of the lifestyle audit. At which point we then compile a dossier on that one member of Parliament, present it to the Speaker of Parliament, and insist that the Speaker of Parliament then institute a formal lifestyle audit through Parliament against that one person. Should the Speaker of Parliament refuse to do so, that is the point at which we take the Speaker of Parliament to court to force the courts to insist that the Speaker impose that lifestyle audit on one person. So in other words, what we are doing is we're creating a framework that makes it really difficult for the Speaker to get away with not taking action against that one person. And so we start going after corrupt people one person at a time. So as Roman described it, it's a sniper approach rather than a shotgun approach. And we believe that this is going to be one of the most powerful weapons at our disposal in terms of cleaning up our country. Roman?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a doctrine in administrative law whereby you have to use up all possible remedies before doing, the final thing. So it's a bit of a long process because we have to do the investigation, we have to approach the Speaker. If she or he refuses, we have to go to court to make them actually do the lifestyle audit. If they still don't do it, then we have to take it to court again. We can get cost orders against the Speaker personally as well, which has been confirmed by the Constitutional Court against Batapilet Lamini, for example. It's very important that there is a systematic individualist approach to this in terms of taking out individual ministers or individual members of Parliament, because you focus on them, and then once you get the first one out the way or convicted of something, the rest will become a lot more hesitant to A, carry on with what they're doing, or B, we can see that the procedure works, and then we can replicate it a lot easier going forward as well.
Right, so that's the first NPO, and I hope that you've got the broad brushstrokes in terms of what we want to achieve with that. Someone did ask the question whether those will be registered as Section 18A organizations. Absolutely.
Of course.
Yes, because it is our view that every person in this country needs to get maximum value for their tax rands, and anything that we can do that ensures that as much of that as possible goes into areas that you as a taxpayer find useful should actually take place. So we're very clear that that's going to happen. The second NPO that we have in mind is one that is effectively going to be creating a scholarship fund. And we think that this is something that's important because of the fact that the way in which scholarships have historically been run in our country have very much focused on sort of cast your bread upon the waters and see what comes up. And our view is that we very specifically need to be setting up a way to reward excellence. And, think of it as a local equivalent of a Nobel Prize, for want of a better word. But our idea is that we want to have funded through this second NPO a high-profile scholarship that is going to look for excellence among South Africans. And it has to be excellence that is based entirely on merit. And the reward doesn't come up front, the reward comes after the fact. So at the point at which you have actually completed your field of study and you have done something that is truly world-class. We will then pay out the entire cost of your studies to date. But it becomes a fairly significant award that gets paid after the fact. And we want to actually build a sense of people seeing this as something inherently desirable to aspire for. The idea that they have been recognized as people who have done things at a level in terms of their field of study that have actually allowed them to hold their own on the global stage. But we reward them after the fact because that is the way in which business actually succeeds. Your rewards don't come before you've actually achieved. Your rewards come after the fact. And we believe that this will become, in our view, the preeminent form of actually recognizing the meritocracy that exists in our country, but which is currently completely ignored by most people in our country. We believe in a meritocracy. We believe that we have some of the best and brightest in the world. And that's going to be our way of rewarding it. So we will start off on the assumption that while our kitty is still small, by obviously rewarding one person at a time, as the NPO actually grows, then we'll expand it. So, we'll take a view that we start off by having a catch-all category, and then maybe we drill down into specifics. Maybe we have one for medicine. Maybe we have one for nuclear physics. Maybe we have one for telecommunications. But again, the whole idea is to reward people after the fact, much like the Nobel Prize currently does.
Yeah, from our side, of course, that if people achieve excellence and they don't have the burden of the debt that goes with that, they're able to provide value to society a lot quicker than just repaying debt for a number of years and then providing value. So that's another way to look at it. Kanthan, should we just look at the questions very quickly?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
look, I think let's take a look at the questions. But before we do that, I just, for those who are kind of in a hurry to leave, I just want to say, so immediate steps, people that we would like everyone to be doing is firstly go to the website and sign up for membership, just so that we can start building that database at this point. As soon as we've got very critical things in place, so for example, we need to have that Section 18A status for the political party itself, so that your funds coming through to us become tax deductible. So we're not asking you to send money at this stage. And especially please, I know we were collecting donations through Ibululu, which was the marketing organization that we had set up, and but please hold off on sending your contributions for now until we've got that Section 18A status in place, so that you can get the benefit of tax deductions. At this stage, right now, we don't urgently need money for building the infrastructure that we have in place. So once so for starters, we want you to go up there to sign up for membership. Then as soon as the bank accounts and auditors and all of the legal niceties are in place, that's the point at which we will send out a call to action. But in the meanwhile, we do encourage you to start setting up those branch structures by signing up, and immediately at the point at which we've got the legal niceties in place, then we'll get back to you. So Roman, questions?
Yeah. An email will be sent. So sign up for the moment, and then an email will be sent once everything's in place to start payments. So there's a few questions, notably around what happens if people can't afford 50 Rand a month? Can those people still be members?
Yeah, the whole idea behind what we're trying to set up as a ZACP is that we have a tiered approach. If you want to be a member of the ZACP, you've got to have skin in the game. All of us, the 10 of us who stood as candidates, and those behind the scenes. Remember, we funded this entire thing out of our pockets. And in as much as we sincerely want to see a scenario where everyone in the world is able to afford to come on board at a 50 Rand a month membership contribution, that's currently not going to be the case. If you want to sign up as a supporter and not as a member, we'd gladly welcome you to do that. But we're very clear that people who want to be involved in the ZACP in terms of actual policy formulation and the likes, we do want people who are committed to this organization, because it's the only way we are going to be able to succeed. It's also our way of ensuring that we don't end up getting hijacked in the way that the ANC got hijacked when Jacob Zuma sent Julius Malema around the country, just setting up branches all over the place. And suddenly the organization ends up getting overwhelmed. There will be a supporters category for people who want to join up. And there will also be a category very specifically aimed at setting up branches for students at academic institutions. And we certainly don't expect students to be paying us 50 Rand a month as a subscription fee. But yes, for now, we will welcome people on board as supporters, but to participate as a member with all of the rights and responsibilities that go with that, we do want people who are subscribers.
Quite. And Chaz does ask if we can do a 600 Rand once a year in advance as a full year membership. Yes, of course, that would be an option as well. In terms of the SBUs, Kanthan, do you meet signed off by an auditor or simply by an accountant as an accounting officer?
I think an accountant as an accounting officer. I think certainly we will end up with a scenario where there are enough people among us who will probably be able to perform that function in terms of their current business capacity. So you'll have someone, for example, who is a CFO at a company who is willing to assist and provide that level of support. Because remember that we're not running massive multi-billion Rand businesses here. So the way in which money gets spent and dispersed, and the way in which money gets received, on the assumption that things are being routed cleanly through your bank accounts, it really becomes a question of having a person, an appropriately qualified accounting officer, signing off on it. We certainly don't expect every branch to be paying an auditing company to be performing a full-blown audit. But we do want to ensure that those bank accounts in particular are passing scrutiny, so that ultimately we do not get caught flat-footed by the fact that there are shenanigans that are happening in a particular branch that we know nothing about.
Right, just last two questions. Will there be an international SBU?
Yes, they will. We've already discussed that, because one of the strongest bases of support for us has a significant chunk of our voting came from outside the country, which is absolutely fantastic. Obviously, from the point of view of the SBU that's based outside the country, there's not going to be a question of them standing for elections or putting forward a candidate, but we do feel very strongly that they have a critical role to play in terms of providing very real support for us, firstly at a financial level, because 50 Rand a month for someone who is earning in pounds is less than the cost of a beer at a London pub, as an example. But more crucially, we do want that input in terms of policy formulation. Remember, we've got forum.capitalist.org.za is the website where we've already started collecting feedback from people who have come up with some really brilliant suggestions in terms of what we can do at a legislative level, what we can do at an administrative level, or just general business ideas for taking the country forward. And of course, people who are based outside the country have the advantage of seeing how things are meant to work in functioning, efficient societies. And we want to take as much of those ideas and pull them into our operations. So yes, an SBU that's based, that involves all of the South African diaspora, absolutely.
Right, and then just one last one, as more of a statement saying that, be careful of getting professional politicians to join the ZACP, and we fully agree with that. That's why our SBUs are sort of emergent grassroots organization. We want people that work, people that care about their community, people that care about the way the municipality is run, to join or create SBUs, and to ensure that through the work and through the politics of the SBU, they can actually make a profound difference in their area of South Africa. So we don't expect any professional politicians to join on the local level or at the national level anytime soon.
Yes, I think the other advantage that we have there is that, unlike other political organizations, we're certainly not going to be paying salaries, well, certainly not in the short term at any rate, to any people who are part of our structure. And I think professional politicians right now are professional politicians exactly for the reason that that is their profession. And whereas we're taking the view, we're running our country as a startup, as a business, and we wait for the country to become profitable before the shareholders, that's us, start reaping rewards. So that's our view right now in terms of professional politicians. I don't think that we're necessarily going to reject people who have been associated with other political parties and now want to become involved with our setup. Well, basically, if you abide by our principles and are committed to furthering our aims based on our principles, then we're not really going to look at what your political heritage has been. But let's be very clear that you're coming on board here to work on building something. You're not coming on board here to draw a salary. And I think that's going to dissuade a lot of people who have been political players in the past.
Exactly. Skin in the game means not being paid for wanting to do something good, like a startup. Any startup that pays salaries immediately with new investment is, a startup that's not going to exist in a year or two, as we know from experience.
Yeah. Another question: are you guys going to be running the party full-time or part-time, or will there be any full-time employees? I think at an administrative level, there certainly will be some full-time back office support in place. Now, for example, we have people who are currently doing our internet infrastructure, and we certainly need to be paying them at a most basic level. There's going to be administrative stuff that's probably going to require one full-time person, who's effectively just keeping track of all of the paperwork and the like. But by and large, in terms of the NPOs, when they get appointed and at the point at which money starts flowing into them, we will have boards for those NPOs that will have oversight over those, and they will get some token remuneration, but it will be token. There won't be salaries that get paid in the short term. I think certainly that for the 10 of us, we're going to incur costs traversing the country as an example. But again, all of those are completely transparent and above board. All of us certainly fly economy on a regular basis, and we're going to end up declaring all of that stuff at any rate. But having said that, the whole idea of not having full-time salaried staff that are drawing salaries, no, we hire people at the point at which work actually requires that people get hired, and in the short term, there's certainly no need for that.
Yes, I cannot agree more. And remember, we sort of want people that work for the ZACP to be, in the same way that we view parliamentarians. It's a vocation. It's a civic duty. It's something you want to do, not because it pays you, but because you believe it's the right thing to do to make the country work, and to make the country work for your descendants and the country that your children will inherit. It's about principle. It's not about professionalism. It's not about bureaucracy, because that kills more organizations than it saves.
Someone asked a question that says Helen Zille is technically not a professional politician anymore. Why not give her a shout out? Guys, I should actually point out Helen Zille and I have been friends for more than 20 years, and I certainly still consider her to be a very close friend. I personally will be picking her brain for advice whenever possible, but I certainly think at this point she's earned her downtime. Really, she has paid her dues. I think more than any other politician in the post-Mandela era, she has actually exemplified the best of politics in this country. And give the woman some slack for now. At the point at which she picks up the phone and says, hey, I would consider further involvement, we'll have that conversation at the time. But I think really what we try to do is to build intellectual capital among the ZACP that on the part of people who've not been involved in politics before. And I think that there's a lot to be said for bringing in people who are just highly competent and have solid ideas and are not afraid of trying something new simply because no one's ever done that before. And I think most politicians are trapped in the space where, because historically it's been done that way, that's the way they want to do things. So that's my 20 cents on the Helen Ziller thing. And I'm sure it'll pop up again. People will ask us about Helen Ziller. People will ask us about Gwen Gwenya. Let's actually just focus on the base that we're trying to build now, and then pull in other people at some other stage. Roman?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Helen and Gwen both very, very well. I think they've had enough of politics. That's why they're leaving it. So I'm not too sure why they would want to join another political party at all. If they wish to offer assistance and advice, we are more than happy for them to join on that basis. But in terms of an actual position that's paid, no, they're not going to find it here, I'm afraid. And I don't think they would want to anyway. We certainly won't approach them. If they want to give us advice, as I said, we'll be very happy to talk and take their advice, as they have lots of experience. Right. Happy with that, Mr. K? I'm afraid I will need to go. I have a call at one.
Well, I will as well. So I'm just going to send one final shout out. There's someone called Nikhil Gangai who says, can you read this so that I feel special, please? Okay, consider it read so that you feel special. So guys, we're going to wrap up at this point. There's a question that was asked: how long do the verification codes take to come through on the website? I'm glad some of you have already gone out there and started signing up as we've been doing this. As Wogan has responded, the verification codes will go live later on this afternoon, and they will come out. So you will receive them at that point, and then you'll be able to sign up. So thank you, everyone. It's exciting times ahead of us, and we really looking forward to having all of us going on to do some really stunning things with this wonderful country of ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.